Thank you so much for tuning into my show, William Wallace for America. Always looking to bring on some great people to collaborate with. You've heard Jim Price on my show plenty of times before, but we've got some really interesting stuff today that I think you're going to be really not only intrigued by, it's going to make you want to dive deeper, but it's also going to make you want to pay attention to Jim Price's show a little bit more, go visit him a little bit, and check him out at his show at jimprice.com. Jim, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. And it sounds like your audience is clapping and cheering there in the background. At least the dogs are anyway. Thank you so much for having me be on your show, William. It's great to be here. And yes, a lot of the stuff that we're going to be going over or talking about is things that if you choose not to pay attention, that's called cognitive dissonance. And we've heard of that as being a negative term in the society, that to have cognitive dissonance means that you ignore reality. And so all we're going to do is bring you a lot of things that may not feel good, or you may not think that, or I don't like the way that makes it, that sounds weird or icky. But the sad part of it is a lot of what we're going through right now is going to be that. There's no way that we're going to heal this country without actually going in and pull the damage out and allow for the healing process to start. And a lot of that healing process is basically knowledge, taking in and rewriting the mental history of what you've actually, got in your brain. You think you understand America, the history of things, but going back and rewriting that mental history, it's kind of like, it's a, what is it? The 7 stages of grief or separation or whatever you want to call it. The
7 degrees of separation. Right.
Yeah. So when certain things happen in your life, these big events, you do have to go through those 7 degrees, and you go back and forth in those 7 degrees. You don't go one through another and then you're right out of it. Sometimes you go back to 1, sometimes you jump to 5, go back to 3, jump to 4. So that's all part of the evolution of things. So guys, when we talk about this stuff, it's not meant to, insult you, but it's actually meant to really get you to think and put together a better understanding about the world around you.
Jim, I love how you put that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the way I know you hear the audience in the background, they just can't help themselves. And as hard as I try, look, they're giving us raucous applause for how good this content's about to be. Either way.
Come here. Did they come over?
Oh no! They're actually the UPS guy. I think is actually more important.
Yeah.
Or actually, what happens is they're chasing the narrative. The narrative is that the UPS and mailman taste much better than kibbles. So that's kind of like we're doing. We're having to change the narrative up a little bit here. But I love the way that you put that. When you say that we've been conditioned, mentally speaking, to where we have to think a certain way, and we get programmed. In the case of, say, one of our topics today, medical freedom, we get programmed that you go to the doctor, you get your shot, you get your prescription, and then of course, then it is reassured by all the commercials that we see on TV that if you've got swollen toe disease, that that this pharmaceutical company has the swollen toe vaccine, and if you get a side effect from the swollen toe vaccine, they've got another vaccine to heal the side effects. And we go, oh, it's all normal, it's okay, but we forget how much before all of this, before this mental conditioning, there were things before that. What say you on that?
Well, absolutely. And this goes back to, guys, this whole thing, you got to go clear back into the AMA of things, right? Where the Rockefellers or the Bilderbergs or the Rothschilds, they all were involved in creating the AMA that was meant to be able to put more petroleum-based products into your body, and that was what the entire business plan was. No different than the original OPEC, which actually was created by Standard Oil, again, Rockefeller, who wanted to stabilize oil prices globally. This is a sin of a man that actually was executed. The execution of this plan was over 100 years ago, and we're still living in the shadows of the same person. So if you go back to the AMA and you go back to the inception of the IRS, and we go back to the Jekyll Island of things, we see that that's where a lot of things began. But we also got to go back to 1871, where General Grant then went to the Bank of London and borrowed money, where we paid the principal to the Bank of London and the interest to the Vatican. So again, these are things that we don't always want to talk about, because those are way, way long ago in a time when we never understood, in a land we don't live in anymore, because we're so modern, but yet we know that that's not true. All of what we're going through right now is literally a plan that was put into place for someone to have a few extra dollars worth of profit. But yet we're still living that life. We have not broken that pattern. We have not broke the tradition. And so one of the things that we do in our lives, and I say we, I'm including myself in this and anybody else who's listening, is that we do so many things through superstition and tradition. Well, the tradition of it is we always do it that way. And well, why? Well, don't ask. And so that's the superstition part of it, is just don't ask, because that's how we. So go to the doctor if you got a runny nose. Go to the doctor if you got a fever. Go to the doctor if you got a hangnail. Go to the doctor if you think you got something wrong. But I have actually found myself going back to my body and talking to my God and my creator that handled all the healing processes for me. And all I got to do is aid my body in that process. So that's one of the things I've changed. So if we go back and look at the chemistry of things, the spirituality of things, the financial, the medical, the all the different aspects of our lives, these have all been touched because a lot of people forgot that they can go ahead and quit doing whatever it was they were doing. And we started out in this process of moving in this direction of putting petroleum products in things, but we didn't never stop that process. And so one of the things we have to do is ask ourselves, why are we here? And if we go back to the biblical point of view of it, you can go in there and God says you are to be discerning. You are to be discerning, always being discerning. In other words, forensically go back and make sure that you can prove your faith or your belief forwards and backwards, and you can articulate an argument with those things. And that could be everything from your religion all the way to your vaccines or to how you handle money or what money really is. These are the things that you have to do and understand that you have to go back and forensically ask yourself, can I prove what I believe forwards and backwards and articulate a decent argument to be able to stand on ground? And if we can't, then we need to reevaluate those truths. So many of our truths are things that we've heard, but we've never proofed ourselves. And so we have this internet of things, right? This whole internet. Now, suppose the internet's more full of porn than anything else, but I guarantee you there's some knowledge out there that you could go gain just by really looking past that base question or base answer that you were given to that stupid question. Oh, I asked this question, I got this answer, I took this pill, now I'm fine. Except for now I got this thing that I take this pill for, now I'm fine. No, I take this pill for that thing, now I'm fine. Guys, we're not fine, and we have to change how we think about things. So I don't mean to ramble on that, William, but it's
no, you're setting the stage perfectly. While I did a quick intro to bring us on, instead of setting the stage up,
right.
only because we've got so much good information in this episode, and I want people to listen to all this information instead of setting the table. You're doing a fantastic job, in bringing out the information that we're going to talk about. And you're right, we've been. And what's interesting is, we don't realize there was a time before this generation with that mental awareness that you mentioned earlier. We are aware of what's going on in our lifetime today. We don't even know what our grandparents and our great grandparents, the conditioning that they had back then was completely different from ours, and we don't have access to that knowledge, of course. And so that's what I'm trying to wake people up more to, is that there's things going on right now, an awakening where people go look for that information on the internet, like you mentioned before, instead of all the funny videos.
Right.
Just like I think there is a financial awakening going on as a result of Doge, I think that there is a medical awakening going on that I think was there before COVID. I mean, it was kind of rumbling around and people kind of aware of this. And look, even people who are addicted to pharmaceuticals and that are sucked into that vacuum, that's how you get healed. You go to the doctor and get your prescription. Even then, they kind of knew there was something, but yet the movement got energized, I think, as a result of COVID. And now with RFK, I think there's more people that are empowered with what's going to be exposed on a medical freedom. And I think there's going to be a tidal wave of information coming through that you're alluding to. Mm-hmm. So that is going to tell people, hey, before pharmaceutical companies, but whether you believe or don't believe, back before 1900, which I might have you answer that question again, because you got great information with it. Doctors didn't use all the pharmaceuticals to heal people. They used natural things. And then during the show, we're also going to talk about your business silly known mushrooms, because I think that's something that, while it sounds silly, no pun intended, there's a little bit of truth there too. A lot of truth with the product, but that's one aspect. But do you agree with that? RFK is getting ready to give us a big wave.
Yeah. No, mushrooms don't kill you. Remember that. Everybody talks about the mushrooms like, oh, those mushrooms in the yard will kill you. Mushrooms will kill you. No, they don't. The sad part of it is there's only about 1 to 2% of mushrooms worldwide that could possibly give you an irritated stomach and maybe diarrhea, but it's not going to kill you. And the way that they talk about, not everything just kills you in this world. And that's just a living through fear, which is a way to control people. But mushrooms is one of those things that we really should be paying attention to more, especially in our backyards. When we realize that the mushrooms are growing in the backyard, means that we're not using glyphosates and other types of herbicides to kill off the natural fungus, which creates a microbiome and creates healthy plants and trees in the yard. So really, it's absolutely necessary for us to understand that mushrooms are a benefit to us.
So wait, you just now said mushrooms don't kill you, or some mushrooms can't kill you. I've always understood that, and until now, I didn't realize that there's not any poisonous mushrooms.
Yeah, there's a couple out there that if you eat enough of it, it probably would kill you. But for you to find it, it's almost like a miracle. You're better off winning the lottery a few times over, like 3 weeks in a row than finding these mushrooms to be able to eat. And most people, again, are not eating enough mushrooms at all to begin with. That's the other thing. See, everything that we could talk about, William, think about this. Don't do HCQ, hydroxychloroquine. Oh, no, wait, that's antiviral, antifungal. And it also helps with arthritis. Don't do ivermectin. No, that's antiparasitic. It's also helps with arthritis and heart conditions and all that. Oh, don't do quinine. Well, what's quinine? Well, that's from citrus rinds. Wait, that's HCQ? That's what we used to have tonic water. When you'd have a tonic, that's what that was for. Oh, what about the 30 mule borax team? Well, again, teaspoon of borax or in your water, drink it down, helps push all the heavy metals out of our body. The government says, well, don't do that laundry soap. Don't do this. Don't eat pumpkin seeds because they'll get rid of parasites. Don't do ivermectin. Don't HCQ. Don't do nicotine. Nicotine is actually, there's more nicotine in an eggplant than there is in a tobacco plant. And yet we believe that we don't ingest nicotine regularly. All nightshades, which are potatoes and turnips, or not turnips, but what is the parsnips and all these other ones, all these nightshades, tomatoes have tons of nicotine in them. Nicotine is a neuroprotectant. Nicotine is not addictive. The government pays Philip Morris and the other cigarette companies to put on their package that nicotine causes cancer, even though they know that it doesn't do that. The AMA has proven over and over again that nicotine never causes cancer, and that is a neuroprotectant, and it does stimulate your brain, and it is not addictive.
So why do they tell us that it does?
Because it's actually all the other chemicals. The government tells them to lie for the government. So the government's telling you it's the nicotine. See, the government says, you put this label on there. And then they're like, well, you got to pay us. So Philip Morris gets paid to put the label on the side of the cigarette packet that says nicotine causes cancer. The AMA and the government knows it doesn't cause cancer. They are required to put it on there because the government pays them and tells them they have to. It's the formaldehyde and the other 77 chemicals that are on the chemical on the paper and on the cigarette material itself, the tobacco itself. Those chemicals are addictive. Those are the ones that cause cancer, not the tobacco plant. The nicotine is actually a neuroprotectant. It actually helps you regain your smell after you've had COVID or whatever this, and it's not COVID, by the way. We got to quit calling it COVID. Whatever they were doing with these viruses that were out there, these are modified things that go in and to change the process of your body. These COVID viruses would go in and plug themselves into the nicotine receptors, and then you would lose your sense of taste, sleep dysfunction, all kinds of other things from smell and taste and eyesight issues and even sensory issues. Nicotine will go in and knock those viruses out of those nicotine receptors, and regain all your stuff again. But we don't ingest nicotine in the way that they tell us. We don't do that because they tell us it's bad. No, don't do nicotine. Don't do nicotine. But if you just take pipe tobacco and just smoke pipe tobacco or a cigar, that's just true basic nicotine, or American spirits. I tell my son, he smoked cigarettes for a long time. He's 29, he'll be 30 here next month. And I've told him, I said, I don't care how many American spirit cigarettes you smoke. I do not want you smoking Marlboros. And he just like just confusion washes over him because, like, well,
Right.
Dad, you're always at, don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke. I'm like, yeah, but I also know that the nicotine in that tobacco is amazing for you, but it's the chemicals that are killing you, son. And so stay away from that. So if I'm willing to tell my own son
So
that,
so
but
smoking's good for you if you don't get all the other chemicals you're saying.
right, yeah, absolutely. Actually, regular pipe tobacco has all kind. There's just. Did you know that the tobacco plant is a superfood? That the PS1 and PS2 proteins that are in tobacco, our government has been paying the Philip Morris tobacco industry for 40 years, has been paying them to pull the PS1 and PS2 proteins out so that we could give it to third world countries as a nutrient supplement. So this is how amazing tobacco really is, but yet we don't talk about it that way. Tobacco is a nutrient dense plant that you could live off of, but they'll tell you that it's going to kill you with cancer. So you're telling me God created a plant that just gives you cancer? I mean, give me the math on that. So
Well,
God
exactly.
come on.
No, this is very enlightening information to me, but this is one of the pieces of information that you have because you've gone down that medical freedom path. You've gone down that path to say, hey, what was there before there was, pharmaceutical industry? What was there? What did doctors do before, they prescribed pills? I mean, I remember when I was growing up, it's funny, you just now brought back a childhood memory. I remember there was a couple things that my parents used to put tobacco on to heal you. Like if you had if it was a cut or something like that, you
Yep.
know, they put tobacco on it.
Yeah.
And there was some sort of healing property to it that they would do. So I've never known that. I've always known that it was the chemicals that caused the cancer, but I didn't realize that tobacco had such good health qualities.
Yeah.
But again, to your point, it's one of those things that God's given us that
Mhm.
grows naturally in our environment. I've even pointed out there's a Bible verse, there's several Bible verses in the that refer to that healing is in the seed, healing
Wow.
is in the plant. So why wouldn't he? And now you talk about the mushrooms. I
Mhm.
want to bring that up for just a second. I'm gonna hit on this a couple times because you are involved in a mushroom business where
Right.
mushrooms are used in I won't say a pharmaceutical kind of way, but in a healing sort of way. Let's go back to let's cover that for a minute and talk about when were the healing properties of mushrooms known about? What were they used for? Then I guess there's probably a timeline of when they were I don't want to say made fun of, but made the bad guy, and now we're finding out that's a good thing. Can you go through that timeline for us?
Well, the simple and short answer to it is that since the dawn of time, mushrooms have always been a part of our societies, going back to the Nordics, going back to Chinese medicine, even going back to the Chinese people that were settled into America called the Native Americans. Even the Incans and the Mayans all used mushrooms as a part of rituals, as a part of their everyday eating. They understood the benefits of it. So for us, when we think about that, the only time that mushrooms became poisonous to us was about 125 years ago. Somewhere between about 125 to 120 years ago, all of a sudden, no, the mushrooms will kill you. Well, that's also when the AMA was started. That's when the Rockefeller Institute went out and started producing petroleum based medications that cause side effects because medications go in and do something as they push things out of the way. Now, mushrooms, and you talked about my mushroom line earlier. And this was kind of a thing for me when I saw people rushing to mushrooms. I looked at the back of the bottle. It says mycelium brown rice, fermented brown rice biomass. And I'm like, well, that none of that says mushroom to me. And
Right.
find out that what happens is if I were to have if this was a rice cake. This is kind of what a rice cake looks like. It looks like a brick. It looks like
Right.
this facial tissue box. We're not allowed to call them Kleenex because they're facial tissues. That's another one of those things we don't really know what we're talking about because this is a facial tissue, not Kleenex, because Puffs made this one. Anyway, so what we do is most of the time we'll use like Milo or hemp or rice or fermented brown rice, which fermented rice is actually, if I understand right, is not always good for you. Anyway, we'll talk about that here in a second. So you take this rice cake and you put it in an autoclave, and then you go that way it gets rid of any type of bacteria or funguses. You're really wanting to make sure it's very clean. Well, then what they do is you go in with a little syringe and you put the spores into the rice cake. Now this is covered in plastic. It's got a little plastic wrap around it. And in that there we put a little spores in there, and then all of a sudden the spores start growing out. They're growing those roots, the mycelium, the roots of the mushroom, and then all of a sudden the lion's mane starts popping out, right? Starts growing out and does this, and then they grind it up and then they feed it to you. Now, tell me how much mushroom was involved there. Well, there was only that little bit of mushroom coming out of the top because the rest of it's all the rice cake and the mycelium, right?
Right.
But my business plan, and then what happens is like Host Defense and others, they grind that up and then they feed it to you, call it mushroom coffee or mushroom supplements. And what I do is I continue to let this lion's mane grow until it's twice the size of the rice cake, and then I cut that off. I cut it off and I throw this part away, and then I take the lion's mane, and then I use a vacuum process to release it to make it so big that it's actually this huge ball. It's all the mushrooms coming apart and the vacuum. And then as you take the vacuum away, it stays open and it's actually bioavailable in the mouth. And so when I saw that people were grinding up rice cakes and feeding it to people, calling it mushrooms, I'm like, don't you guys just want mushroom? Don't you? If I said, hey, Willie, you want some lion's mane? You'd be like, hey, man, only if it's got mycelium in it. You'd be like, nobody says that. Like, hey, if I want lion's mane, I want lion's mane. So the whole point of it is that we went out and we started developing the lion's mane, the reishi, the turkey tail, and the chaga. Now, this is the crown chakra, the third eye, pineal gland. Then you have the heart chakra, and then you have the root chakra. So lion's mane, reishi, turkey tail, and chaga, and these all do very amazing things to the body. Now, and William, I've talked to you about this. If I gave you a dropper full of mushroom to you out of the same bottle, I gave myself the same dropper full. Those two droppers full of material are going to do completely different things for you and I. Why? Mushrooms are adaptogenic. They turn themselves into what your body needs. And as it finds more things that it needs, it turns itself into that until it runs out. And it's meaning that it's just not like vitamin C that does vitamin C stuff, right? I'm vitamin C. This is what I do vitamin C. No, lion's mane goes in and sees that maybe there's some things with the nutrition of the brain. Maybe there's more work that needs to be done on the nerve endings. Maybe there's more myelin that needs to be created.
Almost sounds like a stem cell effect kind of thing.
A perfect analogy. It goes in and it knows what it has to fix, and it just keeps doing it. So every time, let's say it came this far last time, you took lion's mane, it went this far. Well, you took lion's mane and it comes in and it goes this far. And then you take lion's mane and again, it goes this far. And every time it just goes a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. And it keeps just doing more and more for your body. And usually what I will tell people is as I take lion's mane and reishi and chaga and turkey tail and cordyceps, as I take those, when the days I forget to take my mushrooms, I notice. That's when I notice like, I didn't have my mushrooms today. And I feel it. I mean, I really do.
When did doctors stop? Oh, well, let's put it this way. There has to be a time. We're going over this timeline. So I want to give everybody, kind of an idea where we're going with this. We're kind of showing a timeline of when, doctors and people used more natural methods for healing and treatment and curing. And then there was a time when, and you say it's 120 years ago, when AMA started and the Rothschild started using pharmaceutical type, petroleum-based pharmaceuticals. And then, mushrooms are given a bad name along with all the other natural things were given a bad name. So there's a timeline that we're kind of painting here. Yeah. When was it that, or can you point back to studies where doctors and or even people in general used mushrooms for healing?
Well, you go back to Chinese medicine, and it's everything in Chinese medicine is almost mushroom based. And I mean that, like, if you go back to their herbs and their blends and their things that they do for, things from uric acid buildup, which is called gout. This is the crystallization of uric crystals in your joints and causing you joint pain because of high uric acid. They would say, well, that's because of processed foods. But in reality, it's just a bad pH, which means you don't have enough alkalinity. You don't have enough salt in your diet. But really, in reality, the mushrooms have always been used. So they got thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years of Chinese medicine documentation showing over and over again, mushrooms are a part of everything. What happened, though, for us was, again, like I said, the Rockefeller Institute, they had some doctors. Now, this is where the word quack comes from. This is where AMA went out and sued everybody who uses herbs, who uses Coca-Cola to heal, right? To aid quinine, to heal the body, all these things. So the problem is coca leaves, or the stimulant from the coca plant, meaning cocaine, that was used as a way to kind of, when people were having certain amounts of fatigue or having exhaustion, they were using that as a mild stimulant, not as an everyday use, but when they knew that they had something coming up, they were having a long day, and they would use it as something that kind of like we do with a cup of coffee. And it was naturally regulated. THC was actually part of it, heroin or morphine, opiates were a part of it. People understood and used them in a way that was very, very moderate. The abuse of those types of pharmaceutical drugs did not come in until the 70s and 80s, when the pharmaceutical drug companies actually were able to start advertising to the American public. That became a thing. When we changed where we could actually advertise to the American public, that's where the abuse of pharmaceuticals came in. Before that, we didn't have those things. And we got to quit lying to ourselves about how things actually progressed and where addictions really came from. And addictions come from ADHD medication, which is just refined meth. It's clinically proven, scientifically lab created meth, is all ADHD medication is. So
yeah, that's why a lot of these kids are selling their ADHD medicine to be able to get, because the drug dealers use it to make drugs.
right. And everybody likes them. Oh, hey, let me have one of your Adderalls. Let me have this. Let me have that. So the bad part of it is that these things go in and do a specific thing as a snowplow does, but it pushes a lot of things out of the way. And the sad part of that is that if we just go back to the original, when AMA was created in the early 1900s, and when it really went into the colleges, when the colleges were pushing pharmaceuticals, that's when everything changed. And so the doctors were studying to answer on a test that was only pharmaceutical based, not about chromium picolinate, which softens the cell walls and allows the hormone insulin, testosterone, and insulin to flow freely in and out of the cell, so you're not insulin resistant, which means you get rid of your diabetes side effects. So insulin resistance creates diabetes. Diabetes isn't insulin resistance. See, again, we don't even use the right words to talk about our own ailments. So to be insulin resistant, you use chromium picolinate or chromium. Chromium allows the softening of the cell walls because of glyphosates, Roundup. Roundup has been one of the most horrific things been introduced to our American diet. 1971 to 72, it was approved by the FDA and all by the USDA to be used on food products in the field, as well in storage and in the food processing. So glyphosates then were brought in. Well, then all of a sudden we also started upticking more vaccines. So the pharmaceutical companies and the tobacco industry and the food industry are basically all owned by the exact same companies. So when we think about how all this works, when we think about how we got to this point, Philip Morris went out and bought North American Biscuit Company, Nabisco. Philip Morris went out and bought all these different cracker companies, bread companies, process that were anywhere they could find where they were processing any type of food from its original form. They didn't buy apple companies. They don't buy apple orchards. They bought applesauce companies so they could add addictive processes in there that keeps you going back and eating it more and more. And that's where the evolution. So you go from the early 1900s, and it's just really not a lot was going on, but the doctors were always testing to pharmaceutical answers. The doctors were always testing the pharmaceutical answers. So they only know to do a Lipitor. They only know to do it, all these different things. They don't know that you can actually just go give somebody milk thistle to reverse the injuries to their liver. They don't know that you can use chromium picolinate to get rid of, diabetic symptoms. No, let's give you some more insulin. Let's give you a GLP-1 blocker. Let's give you, so again,
instead of giving you things that go to the root of the problem, that solve it before it gets out of hand, they're just giving a topical. They're just giving you basically an ointment to put on top of it and cover it up and treat the visible symptoms instead of doing things that go to the root, which is where, as I've been saying throughout the show, where at some point in time, doctors used to do that. They used to, when they treated people, they said, oh, this disease is caused by this. To stop it, they would know how to go to the root of the problem using, no pun intended, things that had roots. I mean, pretty much.
You use the biblical reference that God said, eat the seeds and where the nutrients at. Well, think about what the ovium or the next generation of a plant is, but the seeds, right? So that's where all of the nutrients for the next generation are. So you should only eat vegetables that are a flower or that have a seed in it. If it does not have a flower, if you're not eating the flower, so don't eat the stem and don't eat the leaves. If it's not a flower and it does not have seeds in it, don't eat it, because there are actually protectants in the leaves of things. Yes, lettuce. Yes, kale. Yes, spinach. There are protectant chemicals in there that keeps you from eating it because it weakens the stomach lining. So everybody out there trying to save their diet by eating a salad is actually creating dysfunction in the gut that then causes them to have dysregulation, leaky gut disease. Then we have IBS and Crohn's and regurg and blah, 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 blah. All this because you keep eating that salad that they told you was going to make you thinner, but it actually creates more inflammation, which makes you fatter. You're not chasing fat. You're chasing inflammation. Stop trying to have a low salt, low fat diet. That is what's killing you. 100% of your brain is cholesterol. 100% of your brain is fat.
So you're saying you're saying things that are anti what the doctor's been telling us. So what makes you smarter than a fifth grader, or in this case, smarter, or what makes not you this information? You're just a deliverer of the information, and that's why I bring you on and collaborate with you, because I know how smart you are. People right now listening to this are just getting a taste, and some of them are rolling their eyes. I can hear it over here. Some of them know it. And, but what my thing is, for the people that know it, I'm bringing them more information. But for the people who don't know it and think of us as crazy conspiracy theories for putting this kind of information out there, I want to give those people a little bit of something that might open their eye a little bit more, make them go on the internet and go, hey, how true is this? So what is there a catalyst? Is there a turning point, I guess a catalyst of time that where you said your eyes opened and you saw it, but then also when that light went off again, let's look at that timeline. I keep referring to that timeline because not only do we have a point of time in this short time period of our lives to recondition our minds for what we're told in this lifetime. Let's broaden that light and say, hey, look back to the 1900s, look back to the 1800s. So I'll give you the moment to answer that long question.
So basically, a lot of it, first of all, what makes me an expert? Nothing. What makes a doctor an expert? Nothing. Long-term exposure to knowledge and gaining that through factual living and doing things. That's how I've gotten to where I'm at. I started out on a probiotic I started out on kefir, then went to a probiotic, then went to tart cherry, then went to Lugol's iodine. And then I've been on. And I basically found out that the minerals are the things that'll put the cartilage back in your bones. The cartilage will put the disc back in your back. The cartilage will help you sleep. The cartilage will help your liver function. Or not the cartilage, but the minerals. You're not born with all the cartilage you'll have for the rest of your life the day you were born. Cartilage is constantly being rebuilt, and it takes minerals to do that. But one of the great things that we've done is that we've got these reverse osmosis machines in our houses that gets all the chemicals out, but it also takes all the minerals out. So you can deplete yourself by drinking too much demineralized water. That's why you keep bringing in the mineral salt 3 and 4 times a day, a pinch under your tongue, swallow it down, and that's going to help you gain that. Now, the reason I can say the things I have said about my body and what I've seen them myself do is because, guys, I know I'm not you. I'm not you. But I was a guy who was horribly sick, and not like at you. I can't get out of bed. And, I can't do it today. No, I was a general contractor. I was doing everything, running like crazy, had my 5 kids. I was doing everything I was supposed to do, but my digestive system was an absolute wreck. My mind was a wreck. I was dealing with anxieties and doubts and fears, and my gut was, I couldn't. if I had a little taste of salsa, man, I had regurg and heartburn so bad. I'd just be like, oh God, help me. And I'm down in Pepto-Bismol. Come to find out, Pepto-Bismol actually weakens the stomach and the lining of the stomach, and it's actually horrific for the intestinal lining. So Pepto-Bismol is horrible. I love the way it tastes. But sodium bicarbonate. If you buy Members Mark sodium bicarbonate or Tums, it actually only has sodium bicarbonate. But if you buy Tums, it's got 12 different ingredients in it. So what it was is I started learning about soybean oils and the disruption of estrogen in the body from soybean. Started learning about how processed seed oils are causing this dysregulation of the stomach and the lining. I found out that seed oils are rancid the day they're made, and the only reason you smell a seed oil go bad is because the deodorant wore out. So like at the end of the day, you're like, hey, my deodorant wore out. Woo, man, I'm a little ripe. Well, that's what happens to your seed oil, your canola oils, your vegetable oils, your, all the different oils that are out there. You should never cook with any oils at all. You should only cook with fat, tallow, or lard. That is it.
Do you know what cottonseed oil? Well, I see cottonseed oil in a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Do you know what cottonseed oil was used for during World War II?
Lubricant. not the fun kind either, but
what's that?
Not the fun kind,
Right, exactly.
But see, this is again, we have been played just like the whole idea of diet soda and aspartame. Aspartame thins the cell walls in your brain cells and makes them pop. So why would you want that? I drank for probably 2 decades. I drank Diet Pepsi. I was a lifeguard in Glendale, Arizona, and that was all we had there. And so I got used to drinking Diet Pepsi at the pool. And so I was constantly doing that, and I got used to drinking it. So I drank it for a long time. And now I worry about whether I'm going to have dementia or long-term memory issues because of it. So I'm doing everything I can to put my body back together, because I've now realized that the aspartame, the soybean oils, the MSGs, the BPH or BHT that's in corn syrup, that causes the stomach lining to disrupt. This is because BHT that's in corn is there to make the bugs' stomachs explode so they won't eat the corn. So that actually is concentrated in high fructose corn syrup and goes into our body and destroys our stomach. That's why people who drink soda tend to have more regurg or more stomach issues. This is all part of that. Let me go back to the timeline of things, though. Guys, there are major timelines of everything. Go back and study the Friday the 13th event that actually was the Knights Templars being executed by the Vatican and the crowns, the princes and the kings of the time, killed every Knights Templar known to man on Friday the 13th. It has nothing to do with bad luck, but the fact that they were killing their debtors. The Knights Templars had gained a lot of power because they had all this debt they were holding for the crown and for the Vatican. They killed them all, so they did not have a debtor anymore. So that was kind of cool. So go back to the 1300s, study that. Also study the origins of the King James Bible and what King James wrote before the Bible, and then go in and talk about Queen Elizabeth and the Puritan movement of those things, and then go into, now we're getting closer to the Revolutionary War, and then we go into the Civil War that was an individual state rights and had to do with the fact that the Federalist model that Lincoln put us into the Federalist model. He said, either you do what you're told or we're coming to get you. And that moment right there, when the federal government reached down into the states, a lot of people will tell you, especially when I saw this documentary, even on History Channel, oh, it's always about slavery. It was never about state rights. That's not true. If you actually go back to the articles that were written, the letters that were written, it had to do with, we will take care of this in our way. Let us vote and have state representation the way the North does. We want state representation from the South. And there was this whole debate in there, but Lincoln put us in the Federalist model that we are living in today, that Trump is trying to pull us out of.
Right.
Trump is trying to pull us out of the Federalist model of top-down Uncle Sam. So 1871, after the Civil War, we're broke, right? We ain't got no money to run anything. We got a lot of problems. We're trying to pay everybody. We're giving everybody their mule, their acres of land, boat rides to wherever they want to go. We take Haiti was created by Christian slaves. But remember, only 1% to 2% of slaves that ever came out of Africa or other countries ever made it to America. And only less than 1% of Americans could actually afford to own another human being because it was very expensive. A lot of people think of it as, oh, it was just free and you just go buy slaves. They're just laying around. Well, have you ever heard somebody having a live-in nanny or a live-in maid? That's
Right.
very rare. Well, that's the same thing that they were back then. Not everybody had one. Very, very few people did. But yet the Irish were sold at 10 cents on the dollar during the potato famine. So let's look up the potato famine, the
Have you
exact time that was
have you
going.
have you read Thomas Sowell's book, I'm sorry, Black Rednecks and White Liberals?
No, I have not. That's
This
the name of the book.
It is. I know it's of course he goes into all this, Jim, and a lot of what you're saying, I'm going, wow, did you read that book?
No,
Because
this
he
is
not
just
only talks,
history. Go ahead.
yeah, but because when you pay attention, you start realizing, like when you break out of that bubble, when you break out of that what we've been conditioned to, and it goes back to not only medical freedom, like we've been talking about, but going into what you're bringing up now, where it goes into things like slavery and freedom issues and whatnot. We've been conditioned to think one way,
Mhm.
but when we really start doing deep dives, it's hard, not because we mentally can't. It's hard because we're going against the grain of what we've been conditioned to believe. So not only medical freedom, but like you're talking about slavery, we've
Yeah.
been conditioned to believe it's one thing when the reality is it was so much more. Thomas Sowell, he talks about how much of the Civil War was because of slavery, but how much a bigger part of it was not because of slavery. And
Right.
he talks about
Well, all
how
the
in Louisiana, huh?
conversation started at slavery, but the real meaning was individual state rights, which
Correct.
is constitutional.
But,
Again,
but like in Louisiana, for instance, he goes into how 1/3 of all slave owners were black. So when you when you look at those statistics,
yeah.
you realize,
Uh,
and look, I'll give you a small example, and
all
then
the
and
reparations
then I'll,
all
huh?
the reparations were paid. Remember, Lincoln, that was the whole point of it. All the reparations were paid. We did not skip the reparations portion of it. Everybody got their part. All the soldiers were paid on both sides, the North and the South. They were all paid back. Everybody got their 40 acres of land and a mule, the whole thing. Everybody, and that's why General Grant was broke, because everybody got paid. So he went to the Bank of London, So this is where this is all the causation correlation of things, right? Here got slavery. Well, how do we get slavery and go into a massive debt and having the crown back over us when we had just been free for 100 years, right? Well, that's because the slavery, when we went and did all that with individual state rights, which Lincoln put us into, the Federalist model. I keep going back. I want to remind everybody of that. But then all of a sudden, why do we get to the Federal Reserve? Why do we have the IRS? Why do we have the AMA? It has to do more with how the war and the Federalist model put us there.
And how and this timeline that started back during that time is
Mhm.
how we all ended up being controlled, not only physically but mentally, into being conditioned on not only our medical freedom and our financial freedom, but our ability to think outside of the box and realize there's more to it than not. For instance, like I was going to tell you about the narrative. We have a general statue here in New Orleans that got removed a few years ago. And, everybody said, well, he was a Confederate general, and so he should be removed. Well, he was half black. He was a Creole. And he actually fought more he fought for freedom of all blacks in New Orleans against his own people that were owning slaves, that were the 1/3 of all black people owning slaves in the New Orleans area alone. But again, those narratives, we're conditioned in a way that we go, okay, that answers it. That answers the question. Let's not think anything further. And I'll make another analogy that's going to pertain to how we're conditioned, which of course reflects upon our timeline that we're going over, which is even when we have a shooting per se, you know, they come out. I'll take the shooting that has the massacre that just happened in New Orleans, and a
Mhm.
couple days later with the Vegas thing, they say, "Whoop, we caught the guy, problem solved. There it is. It's over. And we are conditioned to accept what the government's telling us is here was the problem. Here's the answer. Go back to work. Don't think about this anymore. So nobody goes into doing a deeper dive to say, hey, could there have been more there? It goes back to our medical freedom. We're told by the pharmaceutical companies, here's the answer. It's in this little magic pill, not the red pill, not the blue pill, but our pill. And we go back to thinking that. So I'm going back to an earlier question. Can you point to research that other people can go look up that was before the AMA, when our medical freedoms were more based upon our free thought and doctors' free thought, and actually when we can start this timeline of when we, as a nation, we are not only free medically, but free from the federal government?
Well, a lot of that is very hard to find, one, because the AMA did do book burning. They literally made it against the law to be able to teach anything other than what the AMA is teaching. And that's why doctors are so stringent on their licensure and how they get these. A lot of the stuff, the herbal books, the old remedies, you have to go find the old paperbacks. You got to go find the old, paper hard books, the hardcover paper books. You got to go back into some estate sales and some of these old books to find it, because yes, the AMA purposely did book burning. They went in, and if you had any books, if you had any information that did not align with them directly, see, he was paying congressmen to change the law. He had the AMA, the American Medical Association. This is, the whole thing. This is where he was very good at creating syndications, just like he created the FBI. Now we're going to go back to Rockefeller. Rockefeller had a nationwide chain of private investigators that had a jacket on every major industrial leader and every politician. So we're talking city council, we're talking county commissions, governors, legislators, presidents. He had jackets on all of them. He had file jackets that he had created on every single one of these. And he had this nationwide chain. So if he needed to do something somewhere, he always had leverage on him. Hey, I'm getting ready to do a thing in West Texas. You got anything on a guy out there that I can use to get my oil wells or get my this or get my that? Oh, yeah, here you go. And then he sold that information to the federal government and created the
He was kind of like the George Soros of today.
Federal Bureau of Investigation was started by Rockefeller, the same person who started Standard Oil, who then started AMA, who started the prohibition. He sponsored Molly Hatchet, who was from Kansas. I don't take credit for her at all, but anyway, Molly Hatchet was a Christian enthusiast who said that alcohol is the devil, and he sponsored her to go nationwide to create prohibition so people would stop creating alcohol at their house and driving their vehicles on pure grain alcohol. All Ford vehicles back then were flex fuel. You could do petroleum, you could do alcohol, you could even do candle oils, or not candle oils, but lamp oils. Very easy to operate Ford vehicles back then. But he knew that if he got rid of all the stills, he would sell more petroleum at the pump. And that's why you can't make your own alcohol, but you can sure buy a lot of gasoline.
So how did Rockefeller start the FBI?
Basically, he just went out and started hiring private investigators to go out and create entire portfolios of everybody's girlfriends, everybody's boyfriends, everybody's dirty laundry. Oh, you got a kid in another city. You got this. Bank accounts, associates, whoever you're putting it to, or they were putting it to you. All this was written down for them to be able to manipulate people globally. It was,
but he was never president. So how did he start it?
He sold it to the federal government. It was agreement. He said, hey, I've got all this information. Wouldn't that be great if you guys had it? And so he was he brought Hoover along, that whole thing, all that stuff, guys. We really, in the 1910, 1920, and 1930s, America was robbed. And we think we're being robbed now with the billions and trillions of dollars through Social Security and all the other stuff in our country. Guys, our country was set up for failure because the watchman, no one was watching the watchman. No one was watching the person watching. We needed to make sure we have that, be able to audit and be able to do these things. So it all came in right. So here's the thing. Think about the people who have been assassinated or attempted assassination. Trump wants to get rid of the CIA. Trump wants to get rid of the IRS. Trump wants to get rid of the establishment. What did they try to do? They tried to kill him. Reagan wanted to get rid of the CIA. Reagan wanted to get out of the whole arms deal. What'd they do? They tried to kill him. Then Kennedy wanted to talk about the secret society, which is not the Masons, but the actual secret society, the Skull and Crossbones, Bohemian Grove, the Bilderbergs. That's the real secret society, the establishment. What'd they do? They killed him. What about McKinley? What about Lincoln? What about, I mean, guys, there's examples over and over again.
Lincoln, you said was who gave us our Federalist.
Right, but he also was actually trying to push it back to individual state rights, and he was actually trying to allow for the representation from the people. He wanted the people to be heard, so they killed him because he wasn't going to fall in line. He didn't want the Federal Reserve. See, remember the greenbacks? Do you remember greenback dollars? See,
I've heard of them, yes.
So the greenbacks were Lincoln's gold-backed money. And he actually said, this is the uniform money we're going to use here. We're not going to use the central bank. We're not going to be doing all this stuff. And he was going to use the greenbacks to be able to be a gold-backed currency for America, and they killed him for it. He was actually trying to create what is considered to be a stable currency all for America. And they didn't want him doing that because that would have been done by the Treasury, not by the central bank.
Similar to what Trump wants to do with a gold-backed bill.
Bingo.
And not to mention, one of the last actions of Kennedy was that he signed an executive order to get rid of the Federal Reserve. And one of the first executive orders signed by Lyndon Johnson was to rescind that order. Now wait, Jim, wasn't the angle of that gun you just now did the wrong angle? You went here. Wasn't it more from here?
It's there's one this way and this way, right?
Exactly my point.
Yeah.
So I want to. So
but
now
but who was the director during the assassination? Daddy Bush. Bush Sr. was a director in Dallas at the assassination. But who also reported to Daddy Bush? Barry Soetoro's grandfather, who lived in El Dorado, Kansas, where Barry Soetoro lived for 3 years, and went down to Crawford, Texas with his grandfather to visit Daddy Bush and Bush Jr. And that's where the secret handshake, the candy handshake that Big Mike and Bush Jr. share, that little candy exchange thing they do, this little hand thing they do with each other. That's about Barry going down to Crawford, Texas, and Jr. sneaking candy to Barry Soetoro. You know who Barry Soetoro is, right? Uncle Barry?
Oh, Barack Obama.
There you go. Barack Obama. Baka mama. Well, that's all coming out because now we're getting receipts on his birth certificate. That's going to be coming out again. But so now think about what I just said there. During the assassination, Bush Sr. was the director of CIA, one of the directors in the CIA, and was there in Dallas. Why was a director in Dallas? Well, they were going to kill Kennedy. And who was reporting to him? Barry Soetoro's grandfather. Barry Soetoro was CIA. Who was Barry Soetoro's mother? CIA. Who was Barry Soetoro's father? A confident informant for the CIA in the South Pacific. Who was Barry Soetoro's stepfather? A CIA operative in the South Pacific. So again, CIA. Do you see an A yet?
I'm beginning to see.
Yeah,
I'm beginning to see your eye.
A.
Yeah.
That's the
in my Scottish,
that's the connection of everything, right? So we don't pay attention to the fact that
now
killed Barry Soetoro grandfather's already being primed, and the daughter's already being primed to be able to be part. Do you see it?
So while some of this sounds conspiratorial, it all happens around that middle of the 1900s. All these different events are going on while we're watching the rise of vaccines. We're watching the pharmaceutical companies start to be able to advertise. We're watching a lot of things turn around. We're also watching the middle class be destroyed. We're watching how Margaret Sanger says she wants to exterminate Black people. So they start this little organization called Planned Parenthood. And then when LBJ gets in,
that's still an extension of Molly Hatchet. Molly Hatchet, who started the prohibition, then went to women's suffrage, then went to bra burning, then went to getting fathers out of the home, because don't talk about politics or religion at home. And God, everybody knows Dad's stupid. Remember all the sitcoms during the 50s and 60s, here's Dad, Dad's the dullard, Dad's the dummy, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You know, again, we destroy the father, we get God out of the home, we get fathers out of the home, and next thing you know, here we are. It
And
has
that's
been a
exactly
very
that's exactly what the Great Society did to families. You
yeah.
know, after they signed in and said, "Oh, you're going to get all this great government money, but you can't have a dad in the home." Then we see black families before the Great Society. Black families. I'm using them as a statistic because they were they had a lower divorce rate than white people.
Yep.
Their children did equally well and exceedingly well on standard on testing and test scores as white children. And black family had a higher entrepreneurship rate than white families did because black families started their own businesses because that's how they survived. They had a higher entrepreneur rate. And now you enter into the Great Society during all this time where this timeline that we're painting that we started that we're using kind of medical freedom as the backdrop. We're seeing all these other events happening. And now all of a sudden, after the 60s and the 70s, we see rises in healthcare problems. We see rises in poverty. We see education, going down in America. We see our schools crumbling. We see, of course, they incentivize it with the student loan program. If you can get here, you can borrow money from us, which basically makes the smart people indebted to the government. And all
Yep.
of this happened coming out of the 50s and 60s when I guess that timeline was peaking. We also see, a lower achievement, in the private sector during that time frame. What's your comment on that?
Well, and again, that's the sticky subjects that they've all made us aware of that we can't talk about because of Uncle Barry creating the division between what's our skin color, what's between our legs, and what we do in our bedroom. These are the three things they divide us on. We have to be careful because there's all these quote unquote political landmines. But the sad part of it is that, yes, the black community actually had like a 20% divorce rate, which was way lower than most all others.
Right.
And yet they were very articulate. They had the ability to own businesses, be in office. In fact,
Mhm.
let me add one more thing in here that I hate that we even bring this up as a special topic because that means that we have to treat people differently because they're a special topic, but they're not. These people have always been able to, all Americans have been able to do what Americans have done, but it's all of a sudden that we have to talk about things separately.
Right.
Our government did that to separate us. When I was a kid, I didn't understand that. I didn't realize. I mean, yeah, there was black kids and Asian kids and Hispanic kids and Indians and I never thought about us being different though. No one ever told me I was different until
Right.
Barack came along and told me that. And I think we've all forgot that we've been so brainwashed and gaslighted believing that we had a problem that we keep going back. Oh, we had all these problems. We had all these problems. We had all these problems. It's like, did we? So again, I think that a lot of this has to do with keeping us fighting at each other. But remember the timelines of things. You got to go back. So you start out 1776. Okay, that's really cool. But then literally 100 years later, we're fighting a civil war. Then right after that, we're going and getting money from the Bank of London. But then right after that, here comes petroleum, and here comes the Rockefellers, and here comes the FBI, and then here comes prohibition, and then here comes the AMA, and here comes the, oh, by the way, who started the board of the education department? The Phoenician education system in America that was brought in by no other than the Rockefeller Institute. The Rockefeller Institute brought in the Phoenician style of training slaves. The Phoenician school training that we live in America today is from Phoenicians who trained slaves to be doers, not free thinkers. The idea of sitting in a desk and doing this and standing in line and then go to lunch and then go back to a class and those are all built to build slaves. They're not made to build free thinkers. And that's the Rockefeller Institute that brought that to.
Again, it's another one of those how should we say, conspiracy sounding things that we're squashing, because when you look at homeschooling, you look at how much children excel when they're homeschooled and how much better children do generally speaking when they're homeschooled by their parents or by people that in their families. And we were told for so many years that that's just crazy.
Mhm.
Oh, those homeschool kids, they're not they're not socialized. They're not getting the kind of education that you get when you're out, when you're out of school. And so again, it's one of those things in this timeline that we're talking about. I want to shift our timeline from America and show parallels to things in other countries. And I want to do that by bringing up socialized medicine. A lot of people look at other countries and they say, well, America's got a horrible healthcare system. You look at, that's because we don't have socialized medicine. I remember the argument for so long. The hot topic was other countries have better healthcare because they have socialized medicine. The government pays for everything, so it's just better. And of course, Americans go, wow, if only the government, if only we had socialized medicine, which of course was, what brought about, Obamacare, and why so many people still adhere to Medicaid and Medicare, which, by the way, I'm still one of these people that say we don't have freedom. When you turn 65, you have to be on Medicare. And, and of course, now I'm laughing how many people want to have our FEMA gone and turned into a national disaster healthcare company. But that's a whole topic for another day. Where I'm going with this is when you go to other countries, they don't have the food additives that we have. I'm going to let you elaborate on this. Other countries, people eat better. They eat healthier. They don't have the food additives we have, and instead, and of course, they're going to be healthier, which makes their healthcare system look better. But we in America have gone differently. We've talked about that, how we got there in that timeline. What can you add to that, Jim?
Well, yeah, that's the timeline of it with the additives. So think about 1970, 71, 72. We went from having this glyphosate Roundup chemical that can actually just the paraquat that goes in and basically starves the plant, the leaves of the plant. Well, it was able to be used for, we used that in Vietnam, in Korea. Do you guys remember in these kind of wars where we were doing Agent Orange? Agent Orange that caused people's hair to fall out, caused them to have huge tumors and cancers and all kinds of lung problems and just die from it. You mean that Agent Orange you're talking about that we brought Vietnam War veterans back and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with them? It's glyphosate, Roundup. It's what we put on our foods. All the oats that you eat have glyphosate on them. Unless you know the person who grows it and stores it and you know that they didn't put it on there, it's on there. All of your stuff from soybeans to oats to dry different types of grain. The reason you have a gluten intolerance is not because you are allergic to long strain proteins. It's because the glyphosates have freaked your body out and disrupted the BH4 pathway so that when you bring long strain proteins called wheat in, the gluten coating, the outside sheathing that protects the protein, goes into the body and your body goes, oh, what is all this crap? And it starts giving you a rash, but really you have a ton of glyphosate that's sitting in your pelvis. Glyphosate will not leave your body unless you remove it. And that is probably the greatest crime against us all, is that glyphosate being brought in the early 70s, which all of us are in that window of being those people alive during that time. Those things are all right in front of us, and we need to be very mindful to use things to get the heavy metals out of us and get those things out so we don't have the BH4 pathway disruption, which is connected to dementia, autism, liver dysfunction, gout, bipolar disorders, depression. These are all tied into BH4 pathway disruption.
Jim, how do you get the glyphosate out?
I use Root Brands, Clean Slate. You can also use boron. You can use borax. There are some others out there. I'm sticking to boron and the Clean Slate because to me, those two really seem to have the ingredients that I think is the best for pulling those out. There are some minerals. Everything that pulls out a heavy metal, which is a toxic metal,
charcoal.
Just a mineral. Yeah, just charcoal. So charcoal is what? The minerals of the tree. Ash is the minerals of the tree. When you burn a tree, the oxidation releases the sun's energy back to you. That's what those flames are, is actually the sun's energy being released. And when that releases back out of there, that oxidation, you're leaving back the minerals of the tree. The minerals are what left over for that entire tree. And that's why minerals are good for when you put in your garden, when you plant your tomatoes, you use it for your house plants. And there are people that are talking about how remineralization can happen through ash and sand or gravel or diatomaceous earth or bentonite clay to be able to bring those heavy metals and toxicities out of the body.
Jim, I want you to bring up, because we'll start wrapping up here in shortly. I want you to bring us to that timeline. I want you to go on for a couple of minutes on that timeline of when doctors were doing natural things to pharmaceuticals to where we are now.
So for everything really basically starts around the 1871 thing with General Grant. It seemed like at that point we really lost the keys to the store. No one was paying attention. A lot of things were this wild west of things. We were expanding the country, going west, but also industrialization was hitting the country heavy and hard. Now we go into the 1900s. So 1900. Think about that time. Well, then in 1913, we have the meeting at Jekyll Island, which were the bankers of the world at that time, the most rich of the world at that time, came together and said, we need to create a Federal Reserve System for the country. Now, that's at the same time, we're talking about prohibition. We're talking about the American education system. We're talking about the Federal Reserve. We're talking about the AMA. We're talking about petroleum syndicate. We're talking, you see what I'm saying? The FBI. All these things were created. And by 1931, what happened in the 30s? But we had the Great Depression. But also, we also know that this is where the IRS was brought in. And then when the IRS was brought in, and that IRS was created as a what do you call it, a collection agency for the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a private corporation, not held by the United States government whatsoever. So the Federal Reserve is tied in with the One World Bank, the banking cartel on the backside. So here we go, 1900. We're going 1913, 1931, and then we have this long thing of destruction called World War I and World War II, and we're barely getting clawed out of that, and then we're starting to get things back going, and then boom, we do the whole nuclear bomb thing or hydrogen bomb or the Moab, which again, a lot of people question whether we did the hydrogen bomb or the nuclear bomb at all, but maybe we did a really big bomb. But because there is no nuclear fallout, there is no nuclear radiation, there is none of that, but there were burns from the explosion, but there were no nuclear exposures because of the explosion. So you have to ask yourself that question. So then we go into that process there. Well, a lot of people died, Jimmy. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, well, then 1971, we went off of the silver standard into petroleum dollar. In that moment, we went off the gold standard in 1913. By 1931, we were completely off of that. We were on the silver standard in 1971. We went off of the silver standard to the petroleum dollar. And that's why we had all the disruption of our financial systems for almost 2 years. But then we see that, where Obama and others have brought in other things that are coming up to this point. 1971, we got glyphosates being brought into the food, but also autism started kicking up, childhood deaths, SIDS, all these weird childhood traumas, cancers, all started happening to kids in the early 1970s. And the dysfunction of the body came in because of Roundup or glyphosate or paraquat. So you got to think about, in the last 150 to 160 years, we have had some absolute destruction to our spiritual, financial, and medical industries across the board. But I will tell you right now, guys, getting back to a simple fire, getting back to simple food, bringing the minerals back in your body, ingesting mineral salt 3 to 4 times a day, bringing those minerals back, rehydrating the body in that way. That's where you need to go, because God gave your body all the answers in the world to heal itself. You just got to give it the right nutrients. You don't need to vitamin yourself to death, because if you're not taking copper, all you're doing is buying expensive P. Vitamin C and D and E and all the other stuff will never absorb unless you have copper. If you're not taking copper with those vitamins, well, then you're just got expensive P. Do you see the math there? So again, they're not even telling you how to take good vitamins and make sure they're absorbing in your body. Well, again, we have simple information about how copper is essential and how zinc aids copper in doing different things in the function of the body.
How do you get your copper, by the way?
Multiple ways. I got a copper ring. I got a copper bracelet. I make these. I play with this. I have this little copper tube. I play with it during the show, but I also drink out of a copper vessel every single day. And I take a chelated copper. I take twice as much as they say, because electrolysis of the heart has everything to do with copper. The color of your hair is copper. Your skin elasticity and the wrinkles in your body are copper. Your uptake of vitamin is copper. I mean, copper, 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 copper. I don't know how to tell you guys. And then, Will, you were talking earlier about how you're a big fan of copper and you've been buying a lot of it. Copper is a noble metal and it does aid the body in healing. That's why we had brass doorknobs, because the copper kept bacteria and funguses off of them. When you use stainless steel, viruses and unk and all the gunk and all that just live forever on stainless steel. It really does. Stainless steel is not clean. Copper or brass is amazing, and it's actually an antibacterial, antifungal.
It's amazing that all the and that not only to me how much of this stuff comes out today when you think about it, and we just take it as, oh, they did brass knobs because it was just a cheap metal to make. Oh, we did, but we don't. When you go back in time and you go look at ancient civilizations, and you can find evidence and you can find remnants of all these things that we're talking about in pieces in ancient civilizations, it almost makes us realize, or some of us anyway, that how much less enlightened we actually are when we realize that today we're relying on not only what's in the media and not only what's in the narratives on a political scale, but how they weave in that medical advice. I mean, basically, you don't have to go to the doctor anymore if you watch TV, right? You watch there, and every disease, they talk about every single disease you could ever imagine, all on the commercials from the pharmaceutical companies, and they've got everything that you need. You watch TV, you go to your doctor, you get trapped into this system of thought instead of being able to allow yourself to go, you know what? Maybe I'm just going to try mushrooms. Maybe I'm going to try something different. Maybe I'm going to try to eat better. Maybe I'm going to get out of that loop, to where I'm not caught in the timeline that is bringing America to the wrong place.
Absolutely. Well, and again, guys, it's finding a cause or a problem for something you're already dealing with, and then finding out how more amazing the body is and healing that process. So again, with me, it was probiotics to start my gut health. And then I'm now developed my own, chaga, which again starves out the bad microbiome and brings in the good biome. So again, I'm on this path or journey, and I would love to help people do this. If they want to talk about these things, I can always get you guys good information, or we can talk about it on an individual journey basis. But we have to start somewhere. What is that first step for you? Where is that going to be? Is it this conversation that we're having now? And then you're going to start looking at the backsides of the bottle of stuff you eat. Make sure that you're putting this good stuff in your body. And the crazy part of it is, guys, is that like he was talking about all this other countries that have like one or two items in a product where we have 20 in the same product. We've got to be better consumers. Vote with your dollars. Voting with your dollars really mean a thing. And if you go to Walmart and then you're wondering why Walmart keeps expanding, well, quit going to Walmart. If you think Walmart sucks, don't shop there. Well,
right.
It's so convenient. Stop. It's not convenient if it sucks. It sucks. So stop doing it. It's like, oh, smashing my big toe with a hammer sucks, but it's convenient. How?
It's kind of why we have surrendered our medical freedom, because we don't take that extra step to do that extra thing to go, wait a minute. You mean if I stop eating the spinach, if that's the case? Look, for me, I had kidney stones. And when I learned that spinach is so high in oxalates that it causes kidney stones, wait, why am I eating that stuff, right?
And
so
and stomach lining. The stomach lining is killed by the same process.
Not to mention that what I want our listeners to get the most out of this podcast, Jim, is that maybe they go, oh, that sounds conspiratorial, maybe that sounds wrong, maybe that's information. What I want to get them to get is a little eye-opening material that gets them to look in a different place, other than the TV, other than the commercials, other than what we've been conditioned to believe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been playing putting your website at the bottom of the screen. Can they also find silly gnome mushrooms there too?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, the JimPriceShow.com, you go over there and go under the sponsor section. So like what Will has there with the My Pillow and all that, you go there, see my Pillow. But You go into there, you can see the Silly Gnome. Now, Silly Gnome is spelled P-S-I-L-L-Y-G-N-O-M-E. It's silly with a P, and it was a little play on words, but Silly Gnome, P-S-I-L-L-Y-G-N-O-M-E.com is where you go get your mushrooms and your cordyceps. The cordyceps are amazing. If you're an athlete, have oxygen issues, you're worried about neuropathy, different things like that, cordyceps is bringing oxygen to the blood, nitrous oxide to the vascular system to help with blood pressure and all kinds of stuff. So it's a really big deal. So cordyceps are cool as well. They're out there with the tinctures as well.
So you just doing the tinctures now? Can they buy the actual mushroom? Can they buy the actual powder form or anything?
Well, right now we're working on, yes, we are going to allow that. We were calling that more the boutique. So if there are people who say, I want a gallon of lion's mane, I want a gallon of it, well, we can do that. Or somebody says, well, I wanted to do it in a paste because I have a brain injury. So I'm needing a lot of lion's mane for, I want this big dump so I can have it. Well, we can do things from, the regular dosage to 1,000, 10,000, or 100,000 times the dosage, which would make it really more like a paste at that point. But if you're wanting some big ingestion of this for a true therapeutic reason, we can do boutique orders as well. So just message us on the website, sillygnome.com, and go there and check it out. It's really an awesome product. I've been so amazed at how my body has continued to heal itself and get better. When I thought I was doing pretty good a year and a half ago when I started, I am ashamed that I thought I was doing good then. I'm still learning every day that I'm just almost on my first step of that healing journey every day.
I love it, Jim. I can't thank you enough for all this time that you've spent with me today, and I want to tell our listeners that we're going to have more about this timeline. I would love to show more about this timeline on where America has changed, and I think that changing point that we've shown in this podcast with information is at that point is where America was kind of derailed in a way. And while you pointed out when the Federal Reserve, you pointed out, when with Lincoln, you pointed out when the AMA came over and the Rockefellers, and you find out, you look at all those times in American history as having been a time when America might have gotten off the rails a little bit. There was always events and people that kind of brought us back just enough. But now I think we're at an inflection point where if we don't really work really hard right now with this current administration, we'll be taken off in such a direction that will never return. Because I think America is at that tipping point, which is why I think there's so much of a fight against what Trump is doing right now.
Right. Well, and again, it's don't be cognitive dissident. Don't reject what you see as reality. Do question those things and go back and reevaluate. It's not a problem to reevaluate things that I'm sure of, I have faith. Having discernment is absolutely necessary, and it is a commandment from your creator. So take that time and understand what your power is and what's really going on around you.
Jim, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. And it would be very grateful for you to please share the show with somebody. Also, spend some time with Jim on his show. He's got an amazing show. When I'm not doing my own show or talking to people, I'm watching his show all the time. Before we got started today, I actually asked about some things that I saw on his show that intrigued me that I didn't know. So please tune in to his and share mine. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great day, and God bless America.
Bye-bye.